Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to New York University, Casa Italiana, Zerilli-Marimò. My name is Stefano Albertini. I'm the director of the Casa, and it's with great pleasure that we are here to present tonight Antonio Monda's latest book, Nella Città Nuda, in the Naked City, published in Italy by Rizzoli. And I remind you that there are copies of the book for you to buy upstairs, and I think Antonio will sign them at the end of the event. We have a wonderful panel to talk about Antonio's book tonight, and I'm going to present our guests in just a couple of minutes. I just wanted to remind that this book was born as a sort of experiment while Antonio comes down from the Upper West Side to the Village every day almost to come to teach at NYU, where he teaches in the Maurice Camber Department of Film and Television in the Tisch School of the Arts. And instead of reading or doing other productive things, he started taking snapshots of his fellow passengers on the subway. My first comment on his Facebook page was, "Ti menano, they're going to beat you up." He didn't listen to my advice, as he normally doesn't, and he went on and published several hundred pictures that he took. And of these several hundred, he finally started to think about a productive way of using them, and the way was to put them together in this book, a small selection out of the 100 pictures that he took. And as I said in my invitation to this evening, Antonio made up the stories of the characters that you see photographed in the film, but he did not make up the humanity that produces them. So there is an attention to the reality of things, to the humanity of the people that travel with us every day on the subway, and with whom we rub elbow every day, but the humanity is there, even if the stories are invented, and he actually is giving them new life. Just a few more things about Antonio. As you know, he's a very prolific writer, on top of being a professor here at New York University, and he's between interviews and essays, especially about cinema, that is obviously his specialty, and novels. And his new book is about to come out for Mondadori, this one, in Italy in a month or so, and it's going to be La Casa sulla Roccia, from the Gospel, the house on the rock. It's a great pleasure to welcome him back. He's also an advisory board member here at Casa Italiana, and a very active one, and I thank him again for that. The people who are here with us to talk about Antonio's work are Colum McCann. Colum is originally from Ireland, but he has a strong connection with Italy. He lived in Naples, I believe, for almost a year with his family, and a year. We extended it. His later book is Transatlantic, and is the winner of the National Book Award, and we are very happy and delighted to have Colum with us here tonight. Also, we have Judith Thurman, or as she introduced herself to me, Judith Thurman. Judith is also fluent in Italian, but I think her heart is more in Tuscany than in Campania. And Judith began contributing to The New Yorker in 1987 and became a staff writer in 2000. She writes about fashion, books, and culture. Her subjects have included Malraux, Elsa Schiaparelli, and Cristobal Balenciaga. She's the author of Isaac Dimson, The Life of a Storyteller, which won the 1983 National Book Award for Nonfiction, and Secret of the Flesh, A Life of Colette, winner of the Los Angeles Times Book Award for Biography, and the Salon Book Award for Biography. She's a regular contributor again to The New Yorker. She's a staff writer at The New Yorker, and a collection of essays that she published for The New Yorker under the title Cleopatra's Nose was published in 2007. Thank you again, Judith, for being here with us. And finally, we have Gay Talese. Gay Talese is the inventor of new journalism, and a very prolific and very, very successful writer. Some of his books we also presented here at the Casa. I just want to mention some of the most famous titles that Mr. Talese produced: Thy Neighbor's Wife and Honor Thy Father. His latest book is a collection of his sports writing. The Silent Season is the title of the book. He also happens to be the most elegant writer in the whole world, and I always admire his style and his elegance, not only in writing, but also in the way in which he presents himself. Once again, we are delighted to have you back at Casa Italiana, Mr. Talese. And now we would like to ask Colum to come to the podium, tell us something about the book. Then Antonio is going to read a couple of stories in Italian with super titles on the screen for those of you who do not know Italian yet. And then we're going to call our panel up to the stage to talk with Antonio about his book. Enjoy the evening. Colum, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stefano. It's a real pleasure to be here for what's an extraordinary book and for our great friend Antonio. I will tell you that in the 1990s, I spent about a year and a half getting to know the homeless people in the subway tunnels of New York. There are 700 miles of tunnels in the city. And the one factor amongst all the people who were down there living homeless in the subway tunnels is that they would say, no matter where they came from, they said, one day when I get out of here. And it was a sort of constant comment of hope amongst these people, no matter how difficult their situations were. So I got to know them over the course of a year and a half. And since then, traveling on the subways, I've always thought, what an incredible sort of a conduit of stories that we have moving in and under the city. And when I saw Antonio's book, I said, damn it, he beat me to it. Because this is so brilliantly done. These photographs taken with his iPhone, with the faces shielded, but their humanity completely revealed. These are stories about dignity and grace, and they give the ordinary a sort of magical, a magical feel. They're also about faith, and they're about a reason for belonging, and they become a sort of imagined portrait of this great city. I know nearly all of you know Antonio very, very well. He's an extraordinary person, a great friend, an author, journalist, filmmaker, bon vivant, father, friend, son. He is so many things to so many people. On a night like tonight, it's a real pleasure to celebrate him and to listen to him. Antonio Monda. Thank you.
And the book. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. First of all, thank you, Professor Albertini. He already explained how this book started. I just would like to add a couple of things that the books reveal all my obsessions and also my belief. He mentioned faith. The book starts and ends with a prayer, but there are also stories about boxing, indirectly about movies, and also about moral, ethical themes. Now I read only 2 stories. They're very, very brief. Of course, there is an inspiration, a model, very high, very important, which is Spoon River Anthology. I accidentally realized that this year is the 100th anniversary of the anthology, and I didn't know at the time. So the 2 books are, the first one is called Nymph, and is about a woman who has Alzheimer's. And she sort of refused to accept what's happening. And she goes to the subway, takes the subway, and she doesn't even know where she's going. So if you can put, please, the slide, I will read the first story in Italian, and then, but you can read the subtitle. Ok. Se credono che non abbia capito, sono degli illusi. Richard me lo avrebbe detto in faccia, abbracciandomi, perché così ci si prepara al dolore. Invece il medico, per spiegare quello che mi sta succedendo, ha usato espressioni complicate. Ha parlato di memoria e di qualcosa dentro il mio cervello. Nel referto c'è scritto placche amiloidi e ammassi neurofibrillari, ma di tutto quello che ha detto è rimasto dentro di me una sola parola: progressivo. Lo ha ripetuto 3 volte in mezzo a tante parole, deve essere il suo modo di farmi capire la gravità. Richard ne avrebbe usata una soltanto, irreversibile. Il medico ha aggiunto anche che potrei irritarmi più facilmente per cose sciocche, che avrò qualche difficoltà nel linguaggio e che ho bisogno di qualcuno che stia sempre con me. Sono in una fase iniziale, questo l'ho capito, ma non ricordo quando è che ho cominciato a non sapere più il nome degli oggetti che mi circondano, e poi dei luoghi, delle persone. Ma non mi sento male, anzi. Solo non mi piace che all'improvviso mi sorridano tutti. Non è un mondo vero quello in cui gli altri sono gentili. Mio figlio viene a trovarmi ogni mattina prima di andare al lavoro e oggi ha portato con sé una donna. E Olivia, mamma, non la riconosci? Siamo sposati da 22 anni. Mi ha detto che ho 2 nipoti e che domani porteranno anche loro. Pare che mi adorino, sono fieri della loro nonna. Mi sembra una cara ragazza, Olivia, deve essere una brava moglie. Mi ha lavato i capelli e mi ha messo lo smalto sulle unghie. Poi, prima di andare via, mi ha dato un bacio. Ha detto che sono bella ed elegante. Ma appena sono usciti ho preso la metropolitana in direzione sud con i capelli lavati e il mio smalto. Non so dove scenderò. Qui mi guardano tutti ma non sorridono. Sembrano presi dai propri pensieri. Richard mi ripeteva spesso non rinunciare mai alla tua libertà, questo lo ricordo. E diceva di guardare sempre il mondo, che è sorprendente. Chissà perché in questa stazione ci sono animali sui muri e chissà che animale è quello. Ora non ricordo più come mi chiamo, ma ci sono cose che ricordo benissimo e ricorderò sempre. Come mi chiamava Richard, ad esempio, Nymph, diceva, e aggiungeva sempre amore mio. Poi mi spiegava che le ninfe rendono fertile la natura, amore mio. Ispirano gli esseri umani, tutti, anche quelli che non lo meritano, e guariscono i mali, e poi cantano felici nel luogo a loro consacrato, amore mio. Una volta ho cantato per lui nuda, e lui si è unito a me, come era stonato. Alla Columbia gli studenti lo ascoltavano incantati e alla fine delle lezioni applaudivano. Ci siamo amati 40 anni, ogni giorno, ogni momento, anche quando qualche studentessa lo ha ascoltato con troppo incanto. Ma è stato lui ad andarsene per primo, e le malattie di cuore lasciano la mente intatta, sino alla fine. Prima di chiudere gli occhi per l'ultima volta mi ha detto nell'orecchio «Nymph, in thy horizons be all my sins remembered». Non era una frase sua, ma di uno spettacolo che abbiamo visto insieme, la prima volta che siamo usciti. Mi manca Richard, e se sento la sua mancanza, significa che non ho nulla di irreversibile. Questa è la prima storia. Ve ne leggo. I will read now a second one, which is shorter, and then we start our conversation. And the title of the second short story is LeBron Foster II. I'll wait a second. Mi chiamo LeBron Foster II perché mio padre, prima di uccidere un poliziotto, ha deciso di battezzarmi con il suo stesso nome. Non è bastata la sedia elettrica a farne dimenticare le gesta, ma io non ho mai voluto cambiare il modo in cui mi chiamo, perché se sono al mondo lo devo a lui. Di mia madre ignoro anche il nome e sono cresciuto in un riformatorio dove un prete pallido mi ha spiegato che siamo noi a scegliere quella che sarà la nostra vita. Una cosa che non mi aveva mai detto nessuno. Quando l'ho conosciuto, padre Jim aveva già il sangue malato, ma diceva che il pessimismo è una bestemmia e che si può fare molto in ogni condizione per chi è infelice. Il giorno in cui è morto ho pianto tanto perché mi ha fatto sentire che fosse lui ad aver bisogno di me, e da allora passo le mie giornate portando da mangiare a donne e uomini dimenticati. Li cerco ovunque, nelle stazioni, sotto i ponti, nei letti di cartone. Sono venuti a New York da ogni parte del mondo e ora hanno tutti lo stesso colore e odore. Ma quando sorridono ognuno di loro è diverso. Me l'ha insegnato lui. Mi aspettano e appena mi vedono arrivare mi chiamano con il nome e cognome. Questo mi fa piacere. Lo so, è una piccola vanità. Dopo che abbiamo mangiato parliamo a lungo e scherziamo e a volte anche cantiamo. E un giorno sono arrivati i poliziotti perché il frastuono era enorme. Ma poi hanno sorriso e si sono messi a cantare anche loro. Io non saprei da dove iniziare a curarla l'anima, padre Jim. Quello che è il tuo mestiere. Ma forse riesco a riscaldarla, accarezzandone il corpo. E questo è LeBron. So, thank you. And I think it's time to call on the stage Colum, Judith and Talese. Thank you. Stefano, I leave it here because I read it.
May I remind you that there are chairs in the library on the second floor. If you don't want to go. I know, but there are new people that came in and need to make an announcement. So if you want to sit down, there are chairs in the library on the second floor, and there is a large screen TV from which you can follow the event. Thank you.
Is this work? No. I think so. I just want to say one thing, because in the green room, I asked Antonio, I read the book in Italian, and I said to Antonio, the others had gotten printouts with the translations. I said, who translated them? And Antonio said, his niece. And I just want to say, since I've read them both, she did a wonderful job. I don't know if you're here, but bravissima, veramente. It was beautifully, it really got the poetry.
Thank you. So, you want to start?
Well, tell us.
Maybe you should do.
That's all right. I'll speak. Tell us, really, when you thought what you were seeing was going to be, thank you, going to be a source of your writing. I mean, you're an observer, you're a voyeur, you're sitting in a subway, you're in a furtive way, you're taking pictures with the little, with your little whatever it was. And you're not discovered, and they're so unaware of you being aware. So you're a stealthy figure, I see. And then when did you think, there's something more than just these pictures? In fact, selectively, there are essays, there are private thoughts, there are imaginative instances of your being intrusive, as more so than you're allowed with your little smartphone, wherever you use. Tell us about that.
One of the first lines of the book is sorry, because I apologize with all these people. They didn't know what I was doing. And one of the elements of this book is that you never see their faces. Or when you see the faces, they're out of focus, because of course I didn't ask any permission. They don't know that they are in a book. And not only that, but I did invent stories. Some of these stories are quite tragic, even violent at times. And of course, I must apologize with them. Again, you don't see them, so they cannot be recognized. But I did what I always did since I was a kid, even in the Metropolitana, in the subway in Rome. I always try to think, who is this guy? Where is he going? What did he do before? He just left his wife, or he just had an argument with his son, or maybe he killed someone. And this is what I literally did since I was very, very young. So one day I decided to write these stories. And again, as I mentioned before, in these stories there are a lot of recurrent themes in all my books, in the essays, even in the novels. I cannot write a novel without a boxing scene. I don't know why. Or maybe I do know why, because I love boxing. And I think it's the ultimate sport, but we'll go there later. And so Stefano mentioned before that I took some risk. Yes, in a couple of occasions they wanted to beat me up. And one day, because I didn't realize that on the iPhone there was the flash, so a big man, I said, what are you doing? And on another occasion, I was taking a picture of a man, and a woman was sitting near to me, told him, he's taking a picture of you, you should stop him. So it's a little bit risky, but it was fun. And then I selected not necessarily the best pictures, but the most unrecognizable. And sometime I started from the pictures and I sort of got an inspiration. On the other way around, I wanted to tell a story, and I was looking for a character who would be the right person for the story. And there are a couple, now I have a little secret to reveal, Gay. A couple of stories that started from a real story happened in New York in recent years. And one, it's a story that you recommended. You might remember 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the story of that nanny who killed 2 kids in the Upper West Side. And yeah, it's in the book with different names. I imagine the nanny escaping from the house in the subway, desperate. And it is called Lena il Mostro. And I owe you this, because you told me we should do something with this story.
Well, I was thinking that as I read it, it would be really interesting to get you to do the annotated version of, with all of the literary references and all of the references to news stories. I was
Hamlet, I'm sure.
There's Hamlet. There were all kinds of all kinds of Shakespearean references, but also to things that are more comic, like the Tommaso de Benedetti's story. There's this story of a girl, of a French woman named Françoise, and she's seen from the back, and Antonio gives her the life story of this.
Immediately recognize Tommaso.
Absolutely, the story of a literary hoaxer who made up all kinds of interviews with famous writers. So I'm interested.
Also, who is the important writer who was upset.
Absolutely, but so I think an annotated version, because it's a secret, it really is an underground book in that it's as much a ramble through Antonio's, I suspect, you tell me if I'm wrong, through your unconscious and your, your sort of the narrative digestive track of Antonio Monda. So I'd like to know all of the hidden secrets.
Do you want to respond to that?
No, I mean, yes, I mean, the title of the book is Naked City, but the first person to be naked, it's me, it's Antonio. Of course, the title is an homage to a great 1948 films by Jules Dassin, but it's a way to show that everybody in that particular moment, including the photographer and the storyteller, is or wants to be naked. They are naked because they don't know that I'm doing something a little bit mean. I am naked because I put in the stories, again, all my obsessions. I don't know if I should say that, but it's by far the book where I see myself the most. It's the most personal book I ever did. Although it's a collection of, I don't even know if you can consider short stories with images. It's a strange project, isn't it? But I'm in all the 50 stories. The longing, the fate, the rage, sometimes even the violence that I try to confine and stop. So
I don't find it mean at all. I find it sort of very, very generous. And I love this line between the invented and the real. Clifford Geertz famously said that the invented is real and the real is invented. What he means by the real being invented is very easy to figure out. Just watch Fox 5 News, and the real is invented. But the invented being real is another story altogether. And what Antonio's doing here is he's taking these imaginative acts and laying them on a photograph, but then they become real because they're actually there and they're put down in fiction. And this is the way fiction negotiates the universe, for me anyway. I mean, if we want to think about, say, Dublin in the early part of the 20th century, we want to know what it was, we go to the fiction of the fictional character Leopold Bloom. We go to James Joyce. If we want to know about the Great Depression in the United States, we go to Tom Joad, and we go to the Grapes of Wrath. And so in many ways, these imaginative exercises, I think some of what you're doing is that you're creating these imaginative exercises to create a portrait of the city as it truly is. And it's maybe even more true because you invent it.
Thank you. I love this. Can you repeat it again? So the obsessions are, first of all, boxing. I consider boxing the ultimate sport. I know someone is a little bit repelled by boxing, but once a great champion, George Foreman, said that boxing is what all the other sports want to be.
But can I say that your boxer in here, he's a loser?
Yes, yes, yeah, of course I love losers. I mean, it's too easy to win. It's more interesting to... Yes. Yes, I mean, if you're Muhammad Ali, you don't go in the subway, I think. Or maybe not, I don't know. So, although I adore Muhammad Ali, let me change what I said before. Why boxing? Because despite of what de Coubertin used to say, when you do a sport, you want to win. And not only that, but you want also to defeat your opponent, and sometimes even to humiliate your opponent. It's a tragic, sad truth. And so sport is, boxing is essential. At the end of the match, one is like this on the canvas, the other one is, sorry, one is like this, the other one is on the canvas, often beaten, wounded with blood. And there is something epic. If you think that boxing is present even in the Bible, not to mention how many wonderful writers, from Hemingway to Jack London to Faulkner to you name it, from Virgil, and many, many others. There must be a reason. And not to talk about movies. Did you notice it's the ultimate sport for movies? The Raging Bull, of course. Someone Up Likes Me. Stuart, correct me the title. Someone Up There Likes Me. Yeah, and many, many, many others. Of course, they are the Fall, Rocky. And why? Why you don't have movies about soccer? There must be a reason. You know, it's more complicated. You know, it's a wonderful sport, of course. And then there are ethical stories. There are 2 stories about abortion, where I imagine 2 different choices of 2 different women. They don't know, they're from the back. One is blonde, one is brunette. And then there are stories about journalists. One is the fake journalist that Judith already mentioned. But there is also the story of a man who makes a big, big scoop. He reveals that the mayor is corrupted, but by revealing this, indirectly force a young woman to commit suicide. And I must admit that this story is inspired by the film called Absence of Malice. I don't know if you remember, it's a Sidney Pollack film with Paul Newman. And there is a similar idea. Then there are 2 prayers, as I mentioned before. And then there are crime stories. I say that this book is inspired by Spoon River anthology. And for example, there is a line in the beginning of the book, of Edgar Limasser's book, The Hill. A woman, I think the name is Lizzie, who was killed by the hand of a brute in a brothel. In my story, one of my stories called Eric the Viking, I imagined the story of the brute who just killed Lizzie. And so I was looking for the right face to portray the killer.
Well, in choosing as your realm the subway car, you have chosen, in the case of New York, New Yorkers at their most democratic and passive. They're passive in this sense. When they enter a subway with no seats guaranteed, they're already subjected to a kind of democracy in looking for a space and having no privileges, which you don't on a subway. And in a subway, on the average car, you have all the classes of the city represented, close for the first and only time during the day for most of those people. People who live on the east side, near Central Park, or on the west side of the river, or in Staten Island, could be together on a subway car. And this kind of integrated or egalitarianism is never more evident than in a subway car. People of different languages, people of different wealth, wearing different clothes, having different attitudes, many of which are reflected in your work. But you did see something in your imagination that you could conformed to probably what's the truth, even the repertorial truth. Violence. We had a famous, notorious, or infamous character, I should say. I believe his name was Bernard Goetz. Is it Goetz? I can't spell the last name. Is it G? Is he referenced in some of your character?
No, not this.
Here is a person who lets his hostility and sense of fear, which isn't necessarily the boxer's sense of fear, but the sense of fear that so many people feel when they're with strangers. And the subway car is really a kind of a circus of strangers. And was this in your purview?
Yes, I like what you just said about the democracy. In fact, a couple of the stories are about billionaires that either because they're bored or because they want to be different, they take the subway, maybe 5 o'clock in the morning. Or, this particular story is inspired by a character that I know quite well. So it's very different. You go from the very rich to the very poor, mainly poor, I must say. But now you remind me something which I think is quite funny. As Professor Albertini said, I posted pictures for 3-4 years, almost 1,000 pictures. Then one day I went to Rome and I took a picture And nothing happened. You had reaction from like, dislike, or comments about the faces. Then I went to Rome and I took one single picture and I posted it. And the first thing that happened is, ma quella è mia zia, that's my aunt. It's a true story. I don't know if I responded, but that's the big difference. So no, there is not a Bernard Goetz story. There are a couple of criminal cases. One is the nanny that I mentioned before. The other one is the brute from the Edgar Lee Masters. I reversed the story. And but there are also several stories about disillusion. Women or men who wanted to become something or someone, and they didn't. On the other hand, while I was reading a book, I read an essay by an Italian literary critic who incidentally recently became the first one to interview the Pope Francis. His name is Antonio Spadaro. He's also the editor of Civiltà Cattolica. And he wrote an essay on Hopper, Edward Hopper, who of course was another inspiration for this book. When I say inspiration, I'm not comparing myself, I'm just watching at their work and try to do something with it. So he denied the idea of loneliness in Hopper, and in fact he spoke about attesa, waiting, which I think is an interesting way to look at the marvelous paintings of Edward Hopper. In my stories, I hope, and in my pictures, there is always this idea of attesa, of waiting, and also longing, desire for something.
Well, as a born New Yorker who's been riding the subways for more years than I will ever admit to in public, you were a sort of adopted citizen of New York. You're an adopted citizen. You're a lifer, right? And it's sort of wonderful to see this experience through the somewhat romantic eyes, I have to say, of certainly of a tourist, of a real adopted New Yorker, but of someone who's bringing a very upbeat, very sort of upbeat view to the experience. And I wonder if you were conscious when you were taking the pictures, because there were things that you must have seen that were just heartbreaking. I mean, the very, very derelict-looking man, what's his name, who looks like George, who looks really almost like a yeti, and who is given an incredibly beautiful passage to speak about his condition. But there must have been really appalling things that you saw. And how much directive editing did you do to intensify the flavor of hope?
First of all, thank you. I moved here 20 years ago. I don't know if I'm still adopted or I became a New Yorker in the meantime. This I don't know. But I realized after a while I was preparing the book, I wanted to reach 50 stories, that the tone of the book was quite bleak. There was a lot of loneliness, and I was a little bit concerned because this is not me. So I hope that, and I'm happy that Colum mentioned this when we were in the green room, that here and there, but often appears some light. And there was a moment while I was preparing the final version of the book, editing the final version, when I pushed a little bit this. I wanted to be a little bit more luminous and positive. George is one of the most desperate story because yes, absolutely, because he mentioned the fact that his parents called him George because it's the name of a king, and he still believes that there must dignity and beauty in it. But again, the idea is more being enchanted and long for something, and once again, don't get me wrong, I'm not comparing myself as in the Hopper paintings.
But just the very fact that you allow them a story is almost enough, you know, because most people don't get a chance to tell their story, and most people don't get a chance to feel valuable in any way, certainly don't get a chance to be listened to, and certainly not on an imaginative sphere, which leads me to think, what was it like for you? Because, you know, you're known in lots of different spheres, but also as a journalist, right? And what would have happened if you went and searched out these people's real stories. Would it have been more difficult exercise to write, or what do you think would have happened to you as a person if afterwards, after having imagined them, you'd gone and found the real story?
Or for a few even.
Or for a few of them, yeah.
First of all, I realized when the book was published that in America there is quite a popular book called Humans of New York, or Humans, I think is the, and it's very successful. I'm not necessarily happy about this because it's a similar story, a similar idea, but somehow reversed. Because in that particular case, I think the author did exactly what you mentioned. He sort of interviewed or let them talk, while I totally invented their stories. I never met them. I never spoke with any one of them. I don't know their names. I don't know where they live. I don't know, maybe someone died in the meantime. I really don't know anything about it. They were just...
There was a big burly boyfriend back there early on looking for you, saying, "Where's that Antonio Monda? He's going to be in big trouble tonight."
So I don't think in this particular book there is a journalistic approach. It's totally, of course, fictional, and I try to understand the human elements of these women. And yeah, no, look.
Oh well, I mean, no, but what interests me is how did it feel for you, as a journalist and an author to switch temperatures, to go from one to the other, and how do you do it so agilely? Because you do a lot of things.
I switch temperature from many different things, not only from fiction to non-fiction. I'm sort of accustomed to that. I am moving towards fiction more and more. I just completed my third novel, and I'm already sort of starting a fourth one. I don't know if this is the right decision, but I love more and more to invent and create. In terms of journalism, actually in the book there are several journalists, but they are characters. So there is also sort of a reflection of the idea of who a journalist is. The good side, the not so good side, and there is also an editor-in-chief who is powerful. He is able to destroy politicians, presidents, but is one of the most unhappy men that you can imagine.
Not based on any real life figure.
Of course, it's based on a real. Everybody's based on someone.
Did you find, Antonio, your humanity rising to the occasion where when a panhandler in the subway came to you, you were generous because you knew you were exploiting him because you took his picture? Or, moreover, as you're waiting for a subway and you see these performing musicians, some of them are quite good, some of them are not so good, but
that's another obsession.
Did you, as a patron of the arts, did you give them a few dollars? Tell me about your generosity in the subway.
My generosity is totally average. Sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm not so good. But one of the stories about a musician, and the only reason there is one single story about a musician is because all the other pictures that I took are too recognizable. This one has a hidden face, and I invented that this guy wanted to become a musician, and for a while was quite successful. And he did this facing and fighting against his parents. His father wanted him to become a doctor. And then what happened is that his fortune declined. He no longer is either called by other musicians to play with, or he doesn't record. Sorry, he doesn't. He's no longer successful, so he's forced to play in the subway, and is terrorized that one day his father would pass by. And he leaves because other people more generous than me give him money. And it's called Russell the Musician.
I was wondering if you talk to these characters. Writers do this. Characters talk to the writers, and even if you're my biographical subjects, when I was really stuck, another friend, a fellow biographer, said, "Ask them a question. Talk to them. They'll talk back to you." And I wonder, because you were inventing these stories, you were in some respect co-opting or pre-opting the stories. Did they ever answer you back? Did they ever say, "You have got me so wrong. I haven't been married 3 times. My third wife is actually a sweetheart. My kid is at Stanford. I'm only earning $90,000 a year. I'm not part of the 1%, even despite the suit, which I get from Joseph A. Banks." So I just wondered if there was a dialogue, if you had objections, because, it's a very, no, you didn't.
No, not only I didn't, but sometime I took the pictures and I ran away immediately because I didn't want to be recognized, chased, and beaten. So again, at least 50% of the stories come from the picture. I took a picture and I say, who is this person? Who is this woman? Why is so inspiring to me? On other cases, I wanted to write a story on a boxer, for example, on a loser. And this is, by the way, incidentally inspired by a wonderful and extraordinary book by Joyce Carol Oates called Unboxing. And the quote that I mentioned before on John Foreman is from that book. But in one of the in a section of the essay, she talks about a boxer whom she met, who had fought 25 times and lost 24. So she did what you asked me to do. She spoke with this person. I invented the story of this person.
No, I didn't actually think of you speaking with the person. I actually thought of you speaking with them in your own head.
Yes. No.
Oh.
Now I was going there. Yes. The answer now is yes, and I'm sure that a lot of them are very upset, including the poor woman who plays the nanny who killed the two kids. Yes, several times I say I wrote that this person is I don't know, a killer or something. Not only how do I dare to do this, but maybe even the characters are upset, like in the Picantello play. They want to do something else. They want to play a different role. They don't want to be the killer, the victim, the prostitute, or a beauty who becomes overweight. This is one of the stories, one of my favorite.
Yeah, there are stories everywhere, and when I went down to the subway tunnels, as I said, in the 1990s to write This Side of Brightness, I used to hang out outside the Riverside Park, where there was a couple of hundred people used to live under Riverside Park. There was a couple of hundred people used to live in Grand Central Station. There was a crack tunnel down in Broadway Lafayette, and and I was always petrified to think that something bad was going to happen to me. But in general, what I found was I'd actually stand outside the tunnels. It was the only time in my life that smoking was ever any good for me, because I'd stand outside the tunnels and smoke a cigarette, and the homeless people would come out and they'd ask for a cigarette. And there's that wonderful moment, that language that only smokers know, when somebody touches your hand, some stranger touches your hand very close to your face, and you can look someone absolutely in the eyes and make these split-second decisions about what's around. I imagine that you were making all sorts of split-second decisions as well. And the other question I want to ask on top of this is, which subway were you on? Was it the one train all the way along?
I live on the Upper West Side, and I teach a few blocks from here, so I take always the C and the B. But a few pictures were taken on the number 1, 2, 3.
The 4, 5, 6, I recognize myself.
Yes, yes. Also on the Green Line, I take also that subway often. But going back to your question, this is also a book about New York, of course. And in the introduction, I mentioned a book that influenced me when I was very, very young. Very young, I was 15, 16, yes, very young. Yeah, okay. And it is called L'Eunuco Femmina, The Female Eunuch by German Greer. In the opening page, in the introduction, she writes about the desert of New York. And it's a line that somehow haunts me and torments me. So, what is the difference between the subway in New York and the subway in Tokyo, Madrid? I already mentioned Rome with the aunts recognize immediately, but I don't think that if you do the same book in, let's say, Madrid or London, you have happier faces or less lonely people, and or less longing, enchanted, etc. What is the difference, I think, is the the energy and the contrast between what is outside in New York, so energetic, so brutal, and so exciting, and this moment where you are naked and you are defenseless, you're just waiting that the ride stops. So this contrast is quite different. You don't find the same energy in Rome. When you go outside, you find beauty, but you don't find that element. And
What you find, as I might have said this earlier, what you find in New York, in the subway, more than anywhere else in New York, is extraordinary tolerance.
True.
When you think of this city of 8 million, and all of the languages that are spoken here that are not the first language as English, they are collected, these people with these languages and these attitudes and these classes and these economic levels, all in one subway, as I said before. And what's amazing is there is not wild anger demonstrated, that there is not riots in subways. I mean, whatever confrontation you do learn about through reporting or through, like this Mr. Bernard Goetz incident of about 10 years ago, but that's so extraordinary. It's so extraordinary. How people, I think the fact that New York subways from year to year are places where crowds conduct themselves with great passivity and tolerance. Sometimes even now you see people getting up, I've had this happen to me, for an elder to give you their seat. And it's quite amazing to see that, because it represents good behavior or good manners from people that you think didn't have the advantage of people telling them, this is how you behave. It's an instinctive thing. It's an astonishing thing.
I agree, and I think this tolerance comes from diversity and variety. Because after the first moment where there is the clash between immigrations and different people from all over the world, through pain, what the city and the population acquires is this tolerance. It comes from the diversity, I think. Because everybody comes from a different place, everybody has sometimes a tragic story, a story of poverty, a story of pain, and I think this is what inspires. After a moment of, again, clash and even violence, this is the result.
I think that diversity is in process. And in my time in New York, I was born here, and but we have lived through times of unbelievable intolerance in New York, in which there was really the racial polarization and the fear and the sense of everybody walled up in neighborhoods.
You're talking about the early 90s?
I'm talking about the 70s.
Oh, 70s.
And the drug wars and so forth and so on in the streets. And just the incredible mutual suspicion. And it's gotten incredibly better. And in terms of the politeness on the subway, I remember when I was young, I would always get up to give a seat to a pregnant woman, but guys didn't do that. It was the women who got up to give the seats to the pregnant women. It was really shocking, the lack of civility. And now I think, and this may be the influx of immigrant populations who are very well brought up people, young men, from all over, from the Caribbean, from Africa, who actually, from Asia, who actually revere or deeply respect the old and just get up and give them their seat. But I'm not sure native New York. I think native New York has been vastly improved by.
I believe you're the only native New Yorker.
I'm probably the only one here,
Yeah.
but
Not in the
but native
on
New York.
stage.
Native New York is I can tell you, on my block in the posh East 80s, there was gang war in the 70s, and my neighbor who was young then, who lived there. There was the Irish gang, and there was the Polish gang, there was the German gang, there were the Jews, and there were the.
Looks like my building.
So this, I think it's hard if you haven't lived here for a long time to appreciate how incredibly more civilized this city has become.
But you conquer this through pain, I think, always. That's the sad, true tragedy.
Yeah, and do you remember all those like moving landscapes of art that the trains used to be? You see all these pictures with graffiti, and I remember even just when I arrived here in the 80s, the ceiling fans, the wooden ceiling fans going up, and people jumping from car to car. It's become a lot of people get nostalgic for that sort of past, but I think it's a much better place for us to travel in now. And I will say, in relation to people's getting up out of seats and so on, my wife says that when she was pregnant, it was always men of colour who got up and offered the seat, whereas the white businessman was the one who sort of stayed rooted to the spot, as if they were terrified by this, by the history of this place. But it is becoming essentially what you were saying, such a more democratic place as well. You know, you see all sorts of people, going around on the subways, and it's, of course, it's a much faster way to get. How did you get down here tonight? Did you get down here by subway? I got down here by subway too. And city bike, by the way. Subway and I think your next portrait should be people on city bikes. Which leads me to my next question. What is your next project?
I have a novel coming out in a month, and then after this I read the final story, if you don't mind. And the novel is a love story. It's the most difficult thing I ever written, because apparently on the surface it's very simple, but it is, of course, it's not. And it's a love story which is part of a very, very ambitious project. 2 years ago, I wrote a book called America non esiste, America does not exist, which was set in the 50s in New York. This new book, La Casa sulla Roccia, The House on the Rock, is on the 60s in New York, and some of the characters reappear. And my idea, my dream, my great ambition in 20, 30 years to have a sort of a saga with recurring characters for 50, 60 years. The history of New York, not the history, I mean, based on real characters in New York.
You know what would be wonderful if you could, as such a great film critic and connoisseur of movies, is do a subway montage of subway scenes from New York subway scenes from films. I mean, there's Marty, there's On the Waterfront, there's loads of them. It would be pretty fabulous, and there's new ones, and there's just like the 5-minute introduction.
Professor Albertini invites us, we'll do this. I love this idea. And I have a couple of students, I know this is your homework. So. Now, if you don't mind, I'll read the final story, we promise.
Congratulations, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think from Antonio's last statement about these students doing the work for him, you recognize that after all, he remains an Italian professor, even if he has lived in New York for such a long time. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members of our panel, brilliant as we expected them to be, Talese, Colum McCann, and Judith Thurman. Thank you so much for having been with us tonight to present Antonio's book. And as we said, we want to leave you with Antonio's own words in Italian and the projection on the screen. And I remind you that there are copies of Nella Città Nuda upstairs for sale. Thank you again.
This is a story about a homosexual who is also a devout Catholic. And the title is Zach che crede in Dio, Zach who believes in God. Ti ho trovato quando non ti stavo cercando e da allora non ti ho perso più. E soprattutto, scusatemi, non mi sono più perso io. Credo in quello che ci hai promesso e insegnato, nella tua chiesa e nel tuo vicario, a cui hai detto tutto quello che legherete sulla terra sarà legato in cielo, e tutto quello che scioglierete sulla terra sarà sciolto in cielo. Le so a memoria quelle parole, e conosco il Vangelo in latino perché la lingua della tradizione è anche in quella io credo. Tu sei la buona novella e non c'è niente che mi dia più gioia del sapere che sei la vita, la via, la verità e la vita. Ma oggi, Padre mio, voglio chiedere a te di credere in me, nel mio piccolo cuore di uomo, e di lasciarmi dire quello che sai. Io lo amo, Hugh, anche se so che non dovrei, almeno secondo quello che dice la Chiesa, e che ripete in ogni occasione il tuo vicario, il mio Papa. E sento che è un vero amore, questo è il coraggio di dirtelo. Solo tu, che mi leggi nel cuore, puoi capire quanto sia sincero. Solo tu, Padre mio, sai che non so vivere senza di lui. Amo i maschi da quando sono bambino, e sei stato tu ad avermi creato così. Hai conosciuto la mia natura prima ancora che nascessi,
prima ancora che i miei genitori si conoscessero, prima ancora che esistesse il tempo. E tu mi ami per quello che sono, come mi hai amato e mi amerai sempre, anche quando non ti seguirò. Molti dei tuoi discepoli invece non ce la fanno, ma l'amore è difficile, me l'hai insegnato tu. Io non voglio vivere solo, non voglio vivere casto. A nessuno può essere imposto. Fa che possa darlo questo amore, e riceverlo, e sentire la tua benedizione.
Grazie a tutti. Thank you all. And next year with a new book. Grazie Stefano.